Good evening, YouTube. You guys are now watching another segment of the TheCaliEffect. Today we are back with Yu-Gi-Oh logic, defining how to build a deck effectively, and it's going to be extremely interesting. Where we left off, we were at the monster base, so let's get to the spells. Spells are probably some of the most important parts of the deck, whereas some decks don't run any, they really can't be as fast as deck with spells. Spells are going to be your median between your monsters and your traps, being able to effectively either A, disrupt your opponent's spells and traps, or B, enable your deck to give consistency or power. With that being said, the first thing we want to do is consistency. So let's look at the Quackimiru monsters. All of them require the Diamond Core of Quackimiru to stay on the field or a Beast Warrior. Well, we have the Beast Warrior down, the Beast Warrior effect part checked. We have 6, 7, we have 10 Beast Warriors, so that should that should be enough to sustain them on the field. But the biggest thing about it is that your knight needs, Iron Core of Quackimiru to activate its effect. With that being said, let's look up Iron Core. Iron Core, during your draw phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can add it to your hand instead of drawing it. You can or send one Quackimiru monster from your hand to the graveyard to add this card to your hand. That's not necessarily an amazing effect. It's something that we don't want multiples in, but like I said, with consistency, you want as many as you can play as possible. So you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and put 3 in there. Mainly because, yes, it'll be dead in multiples, but it'll be dead. Your deck will be dead without the card. It's almost like a lose-lose situation. Its effect isn't that bad, but it could have been a lot better. Other spell cards that we should have to add consistency will be Fire Formation Tenki. Now, Tenki is going to search out 10 cards out of our deck. That's amazing. Bear to be able to pop the opponent's monster, Wolfbark to special summon Bear, Quackimiru Urnite to special summon Crusader, and Crusader to recruit any of our Quackimiru cards from the graveyard to the hand. I think that that's pretty solid right there. Next is Diamond Core, and when you build the deck, you want to maximize consistency, period, because like I've said in the video at first, no deck can win any type of championship level event without consistency. As you guys can see, I have 3 Iron Core of Quackimiru just so I can get off your knight's effect. I have 3 Diamond Core of Quackimiru just so I can search your knight. And I have 3 Fire Formation Tenki so I can search your knight, Bear, or Crusader, or Wolfbark whenever I will. With that being said, I have 6 ways to search Quackimiru your knight. That is really good. I have 3 ways to search Diamond Core or Iron Core of Quackimiru, as well as drawing it itself. So that first turn combo should be extremely consistent and very fast for me to get. Now, since I have consistency down packed, I have to look at some other areas that spells can help me. First, I would like to say that spells, all staple spells aren't really staple spells. That's extremely hard to define. Mystical Space Typhoon. This card used to be one of the best staple spells in the world. I'm going to put it to the sideboard. Why? Because now when we deck build, in this part of the area of deck build, we definitely have to think about the matchups that we go against. One of the tier 1 decks right now are artifacts. And not only is Mystical Space Typhoon artifact or bad against artifacts, this deck has a little bit of trouble against the artifact deck type because they can disrupt our interactions between games. The next thing, I want to address that because if they stop our 1 monster, they're going to completely dismantle us. So, how do we get more monsters on the board? Well, this card will definitely help us. Fire Formation Tenki. Being able to gain an additional summon between our Beast Warriors, I think that helps us with the artifact matchup. The opponent thinks that we're just summoning a bear and we enter battle or whatever and they destroy it. Well, guess what? Tensu's going to follow the Wolfbark to go into another play. So we can at least try to gain some established field presence or some established board back. I think I'm going to sum it up with 2 Mystical Space Typhoon just because Mystical Space Typhoon is a really good card. And that's what I have to think about spells. You want a little bit of disruption, but the biggest thing about spells is consistency. Next part we're going to talk about is the trap monster lineup. And like I said, I'm still really iffy on Mystical Space Typhoon, but let's keep going. When we look at Quackimiru's, let's look at some of the trap support that we do have. And when I go down to the trap support, I see Quackimiru's shield. Okay. And then I see, I see all the traps. Activate only when your opponent declares an attack if you control 2 or more Quacky Mirror monsters in your destroy all face-up attack position monsters your opponent controls. I'd rather run Mirror Force. Some of these cards that are theme specific to Quacky Mirrors already have an alternate version, such as Mirror Force to this Quacky Mirror shield, that do the exact same thing, but require less. Mirror Force requires me to have not even to have monsters, to have it face down. Well, this card requires me to have a Iron Core of the Quacky Mirror in my graveyard. I actually at least have to have 2 or more, so it's not really good. But when I look at this card, it's a Harpy's Feather Duster. It says reveal 1 Iron Core Quacky Mirror in your hand. Destroy all face down spell and trap cards your opponent controls. That is nothing less of amazing. It actually does Mystical Space Typhoon's job, except I feel better. Granted, it's a little slow, but it allows me to catch those artifact players off guard and wipe their whole back row. So you know what? I'm going to drop Mystical Space Typhoon in favor of Wrecking Power, but I'm still going to keep some type of immunity to spells and traps, and I'm going to run Forbidden Lance instead. Now, what Lance does is not like Mystical Space Typhoon, but not only does it have some synergy with Fire Fist Bear, it protects our monsters from being destroyed by certain cards. It also is just a really versatile card overall. I think it's a little more versatile than Mystical Space Typhoon. And since we have Wrecking Power filling the void of Mystical Space Typhoon in this deck, I don't think we'll have much of a problem with back row. Now, when you consider staple traps, you have to think about the matchups that this deck is just extremely bad against. That requires a little bit of playtesting. So if you guys do not know the archetype fairly well, I suggest you just play with the staple spells and traps and then playtest and figure out which deck is worse, and then try to main board those aspects without necessarily taking it away from other decks. For example, Debunk will be an amazing card against artifacts in the main board, but what exactly does it do against decks like Prophecy? Maybe even Yugioh? Not much. So you really wouldn't want to main board Debunk unless you're going to an event or a place where everybody plays artifacts. That being said, I'm going to run 2 Wrecking Power. I'm thinking of Dimensional Prison. And also when you build decks, you have to take in consideration to what's meta and what's not. There are certain cards that are just extremely bad for the meta right now. For example, I'll just go ahead and look up Mirror Force, because Mirror Force is not a bad card, but when you look at the card effect and how the meta runs, it's not helpful. Mirror Force destroys all the opponent's attacking monsters and sends them to the graveyard. That means my opponent's Fire and Ice hands will be able to get their effects, and on top of that, more than likely, when my opponent summons the monster, they'll be able to gain all the effects prior to them attacking with Mirror Force. Deprisoned banishes the target, so that means no Fire and Ice hands. That means anything that interacts with the graveyard can no longer activate. I think that's an extraordinary card against these type of matchups. Next, since we are playing a deck with quite a few traps, we might as well go into the other staples, which I would like to call the Holy Trinity. Solemn Warning, Compulse, and Bottomless. Now, these 3 cards I consider the Holy Trinity. If you are playing a deck with traps, these 3 cards are automatically mandated in almost every single deck, just because they're extremely powerful and they are limited to 1 for the reason. We have 5 slots left, and when I look at the Quacky Mirror deck, it's a deck that is almost like a stun deck, but it's good at making ranks and just a lot of outside plays. So what I want to do is make the deck strong enough to counter other decks and at the same time be able to keep that stun aspect. Looking at these traps, I do see a lot, but I need more. What could help me? Now, wiretaps are actually pretty good. Now we'll put them off to the side, because they're just really, really good. I do have Wrecking Power, and I do have Forbidden Lances, so I don't think necessarily that I'll need wiretaps, but they're really good. Actually, now that I think about it, I do need something, and I feel that almost every competitive deck should have some form of it. Effect negation. If your deck does not have a form of effect negation in the main board and the extra deck, the odds of you losing, they become greater. So you know what? I'm not going to run Fiendish Chain. I run too many the continuous spells for that, I'm going to run Breakthrough Skill, which I feel is the superior card this format anyways. Breakthrough Skill helps us deal with that artifact matchup, being able to banish twice, and even on my turn when when my opponent goes off in a moral attack to disrupt my plays, it's just an extraordinarily good card. Now, the last two cards that I would put would probably being Wiretap. I'm leaning more towards Wiretap because it does provide that disruption that this deck probably would need, but I'm not feeling it. I feel like I need more destruction cards with this deck. This is extremely interesting. We are in a position where I necessarily can't think of any traps. We do have Black Horn of Heaven. Black Horn, which I feel is a really good card for stopping Xyz monster decks. You could run those. We also have Trap Tricks, Trap Hole, Nightmare, which I feel is a pretty decent card as well. It can activate more times than Black Horn of Heaven. But you know what? I think I might just bounce back to spells, because Book of Moon is practically a trap card. Book of Moon is practically a trap card. It disrupts the opponent's card effects. It disrupts what the opponent is trying to do. It's probably one of the best neg ones in the game. And I think I will mainboard that copy of Dark Hole, because there will be situations where my opponent will have monsters on the field that I would necessarily want to get rid of before I start going into plays. So this would practically be the Kwakumiru main board. As you can see, I put cards in the sideboard, not necessarily to deal with the meta. We'll worry about the sideboard later. But these cards I would probably want to play test around, because there isn't a such thing as a perfect deck upon building. We're about 10 minutes in, so I guess I could talk about extra deck cards. When you build extra deck cards, you want them to be one of two things. You want them to be synergistic with your cards, and you want them to provide alternate outs to your opponent, depending on what deck they're playing. So I'm just going to full search all the level 4s. If my opponent skill drains me, I should have Fire and Ice Hands for that. But Crazy Box still looms. I'm going to put it right there. If I do have the space, I will run Crazy Box, because it's so easy for us to make it. Like I said, you want cards that don't hurt consistency, or that help you for said situation. This card's an amazing card, but I feel it doesn't really help as much as Maestroke would. It is a 2500 beater that does prevent its destruction twice, but Maestroke kind of flips cards face down, so it's a toughie between those. But I think what really breaks the cake is that this deck isn't pure Beast Warrior. It's a mixture. So if I have Ice Hand and a Fire Fist Bear and I really need to make a Maestroke, this card will kind of clog up space. But what I do feel is obviously Mag Ragnar Zero. It's a pretty good card. Is Brotherhood of the Fire Fist Tiger King, which, like I said, is the staples of the deck. I'm only going to run 2. I don't need more than 2. I can Daigusto Emerald it back. I'm not going to use all 3 Urnite plays for Brotherhood of Fire Fist Tiger King. He does searches our Fire Tenkies and Tenchus, and he also negates all of the monster's effects on the field, allowing us to get over problematic cards like Zen Mains and Gachi Gachi Kentetsu if the opponent ever plays it. Overall, I just think Tiger King is a really good card. Ironically, I have used this other effect to send 3 fire formations to special summon 2 Fire Fist Bear. With the Bear, I went to Daigusto Emerald and then recycled the deck right back. So it's a really, really good card. When you're building extra deck, like I said, you want it to be for said situation. This is going to get over more problematic stuff like Yamato and stuff. As you guys can see, our main board is built on so much destruction. How do we handle cards like Bujin Yamato? Well, Black Ship of Corn is the answer. It gives you Mirogeist for the hands, just so many cards that rely on being sent to the graveyard. It's a bigger body than Abyss Dweller. I'm gonna run 1 copy of 101. I feel I don't need more with all the monster destruction that I do have in my deck, and how my deck can easily take care of monsters. Bills isn't a problem. I have breakthrough skills, Fire Fist Bear. I just have too many ways and outs for it. Diamond Direwolf is obvious. It's a damn near staple. I run 10 Beast Warriors just in case I didn't want to pop Diamond Dire. Evil Storm Exiton Knight's a staple. Maestroke's a staple. I don't really have too many problems with monsters special summons that are level 5 or higher. Cardinal's a strong candidate. If I were you guys, I would genuinely consider it because it's that good. But for right now, I'm not going to run it. I'm going to run Die Booster Emerald, Mermo, or Abyss Dweller. I was going to call it Mermo Abyss Dweller. Got Cowboy. Like I said, you want to build for specific situations, and that's exactly what I feel like I'm doing now. I have 3 extra slots, but if you guys can remember, I am running 2 copies of Tour Guide. Now with that, I would probably dedicate 2 cards to those slots, but I'm not really seeing a card that I would particularly want to invest in, not even really Crazy Box, because even if I am skill drained, my monsters are 2,000 plus attack. I can eventually deal with them and then lance my monsters if I ever needed to get off an effect. So what I'm going to do is go right down to the rank 3s, and I already have 3 rank 3s in mind. First and foremost, I have to run MX Saber Invoker. Why do I have to run MX Saber Invoker? Mainly because that's the reason why I'm running Tour Guide. Invoker and fetches Your Knight reveals Diamond Court, and then I get to special summon him from the deck, essentially going into a 1-card XE, making this card a little more alive because I'm not always going to have this and this. Sometimes I'll have him in this or her in that, which really, really helps with consistency. I think that's amazing. The next thing is that I would love to deal with back row in the form of a monster. And with that being said, I'm going to go right to Ghost Trick Alucard, wherever it is. Here it is. Ghost Trick Alucard. Just in case if I don't have my Tour Guide targets, I can go into Alucard and deal with back row. And the last card I would need is Protection from Destruction. I can go Tour Guide to Tour Guide, going to Anganir, and then follow up with a 10-2 play into Your Knight. And now I know comfortably that my Your Knight play is completely safe with Anganir on board. With that being said, we've done spells, traps, and extra deck. I think that this is an extremely solid extra deck. You guys got to keep in mind the certain specifics when building that part of the deck, and also remember to play test. Thank you guys for watching another segment of the Cali Effect. Tune in to part 3 when I go through the side deck by a vast amount. Please like, comment, subscribe, but most of all, enjoy.